Week number 1, we started learning one of the secrets of creating wealth. And can you remember it? Can you turn to your neighbor and tell them if you are here? If they were not here, explain to them just briefly what is the first secret of wealth. Talk to one another, okay? Talk to one another. Okay, it sounds as though we understood it. Would somebody stand up and call it out loudly so that we can all hear and learn for those who are not here, the visitors we have? What is the first secret of wealth? If you want to create wealth, this you must know and you must follow and obey and do. What is the first secret of wealth? Somebody stand up.
God is a giver of all wealth.
God is a giver of all wealth. Therefore,
we should honor him with our wealth.
Honor him with your wealth. If you're stealing what God has put into your hands and the tithe he requires of you, how can you expect him to bless you with wealth when you're stealing from him? But if you honor what he has given and asked of you, then he will bless you. This is the first secret of wealth. Honor God with your wealth, okay? What is the second secret of wealth? Turn to your neighbor and tell them what we learned last week. Second secret of wealth. Okay? Just talk to your neighbor and then we will call it out. This one should be more fresh.
Where there's no vision, people will perish.
Yes. What the Bible says, without a vision, people perish. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to end up anywhere. You need to sit down and think through, what am I asking God for and why? What is it that I want to accomplish? Is it clear? What am I going to do with the wealth that he creates? Because you know, guys, you may find that actually what you need is only half of what everybody tells you need. And then you don't need to break your back trying to create the wealth at the level that the world around you tells you to create the wealth. After all, when you have 5 cars in your courtyard that you own, how many can you drive at a time? Only one. If you have 4 houses, how many beds can you sleep in at a time? And so you need to ask yourself, why am I going after so much more? And where do I say enough? What is my vision for the creation of wealth? Well, today we want to go on to the third secret of creating wealth. Let me acknowledge that it's interesting how, as we're growing up, no one teaches us how money works. No one teaches us how to create wealth. No one teaches us how you use money wisely. There is this presumption that you grow up, you graduate, you leave school, you go get a job, and voila, you will become wise instantaneously as to how to use money. And no one teaches us. So let me talk to the parents here. It is your responsibility to teach your children how to use money wisely. I'll tell you just a little about what we did, and won't actually have a sermon in it. Maybe one day you can invite me to come and talk about that for the parents in one of your parenting meetings. Your child will leave your home somewhere between the age of 18 and 20 years. When they go to university or college, or they go and find a job, and they leave and, go off to college, and they never really come back. Even when they graduate, they may come and stay with you occasionally, stay for a month, but they're at the stage now where they're trying to get on their feet and go out into the world. So you need to have the deadline that by the age of 18, they need to be good, wise money stewards, so that when they go out into the world, they will not make the mess and the mistakes that you and I made. They will know how to use money. And so here's what we did with our girls, just to teach them, for the parents. It's a freebie. You haven't paid for this one. This is aside from the sermon. We'll come to the sermon. But here's what we did with our kids, okay? We started putting money in their hands at the age of 6 years. And initially, it was simple. It was just spare coins, loose change, giving it to them, going shopping with them, and would ask them as we're going out as a 7-year-old, did you carry your money? Because we wanted them to begin to understand what money can do. It's not just a round metal thing that you play with and flick around. It has value. And they'd go and buy an ice cream, and we didn't have to, in a sense, finance their desire for those things. When we went to the supermarket together, we'll tell them, how much money do you have? Okay, you can't buy that. Let's go and I'll show you what you can buy with what you have. And they began to learn the value of money. Okay? When we would go shopping, we would go with them and explain what could be bought with the budget we had and what they needed to do so that they can learn the value of money. When we went on holiday, we would tell them 6 months ahead, we're going to go to Mombasa for 3 days, and I'm not buying soft drinks for anyone. You have to save up money, and if you do these, little jobs around the house, I'll give you 10 shillings. So save up so that when we go, you buy with your own money. And when we went, if they had spent their money, then they would cry, they would throw a tantrum, but they got nothing unless they had their own money, and they learned how to save. When they became teenagers, we stopped buying clothes for them. And instead what we did is we set down very, very clear standards. We said, no, I'm a father of girls. No spaghetti tops, nothing that shows your stomach. If you buy clothes of that sort, we will cut them up and throw them away and your money is wasted. But from this point on, we will now give you the money that we would have spent buying you clothes. So it's not going to cost us anything more as a parents, but you will now be the one we go with and you buy your own clothes. And they began to learn the value of it. I remember my daughter at around the age of 15, when she turned 15, her auntie wanted to buy her clothes and some clothes, and so called her, and this is a wealthy auntie, took her to Deacon's, okay, and bought her a top that cost 3,000 shillings. My daughter came home and said, Mommy, if she had given me that 3,000 shillings and I went to Bangkok, I would have bought 10 tops. She had begun to learn the value of money. When they turned 15, we started putting their school fees in an account that they would have to now go and pay for themselves. If they use the money badly, they will be kicked out of school, but they will learn the value of money. I kid you not, good people, at the age of 18, my second daughter had begun a business. She would buy land, subdivide it, and sell it. At the age of 18, she had begun a business. And that's what she does for a living today. She has 3 businesses today because she has learned the value of money. And we never need to sort of sit down and talk about money because she's learned. Teach your children. Nobody will teach them. The schools don't teach. Your parents and grandparents won't teach. Your friends won't teach your kids how to use money. If you don't teach them, then all they have is what their peers are doing, which is wasting money and blowing money and drinking money and buying things with money that they don't need. And they will start life badly. No one teaches us unless we are willing to learn. Okay. Now, today's lesson comes from Luke chapter 14, verse 28 through to verse 30. This is what the Bible says. Okay? Is there anyone here who, planning to build a new house, doesn't first sit down and figure the cost so you'll know if you can complete it? If you lay the foundation and then run out of money, you're going to look pretty foolish. Everyone passing by will poke fun at you and say, he started something he could not finish. In other words, what the Bible is saying, what Jesus was saying was, you need to sit down and calculate and budget and plan and see what your cash flow is and make sure that you have enough money to complete the job that you want to begin. Otherwise, you'll end up being the laughing stock of everyone. If you have a project that you want to begin, you must plan your cash flow. your outflow against your inflow, your expenditure against your income before you begin. In other words, guys, you need to budget your money. Let me say to the single young men here, don't get married if you can't afford a wife. They're expensive, I will tell you. I've been married for now 30 years. Don't get kids if you can't afford to take care of them. Kids are a 25-year investment of outflow and outflow and outflow with no income coming from them until maybe, hopefully, after the age of 25 when they get a job. And even then, they don't always give back an inflow. Kids are expensive. Don't get kids if you can't afford them. Don't take a mortgage unless you're sure you can repay. Before you take a mortgage, go for 2 years subtracting the equivalent amount of the mortgage you will have to pay and setting it aside. And if you have the discipline to do that for 2 years consistently, then maybe you can think about getting a mortgage. If you can't do that, do not go to the bank and sign for a mortgage when you don't have the discipline and you have no track record. Don't make financial commitments unless you're sure of what they will cost you. Balancing outflow against inflow. Financial projections and repayments. This, my dear friends, is what we call a budget. Now, we may not like the idea of a budget, the term budget, or even the concept of budgeting, but the Bible tells you, do not begin a project if you cannot finish it, and have not sat down and thought through it and planned out how you are going to finance it. Let me put secret number 3, which is a budget. Let me put it in a different way. I prefer to say it this way. People who budget are the ones who create wealth. Let me put it even a different way. A budget tells your money what to do for you. You assign every shilling because every shilling you earn is your servant. And before they come and begin work, before they are put into your account so that they can work for you, you need to have written a job description for every shilling. That's what you call a budget. And so some shillings you say, I want you to go and create new wealth for me. They're called investments. Others you say, I want you to feed me. They're called your food budget. Others you say, I want you to go and educate my child. That's called school fees. But every shilling needs to have a job description because they are your servant. Some servants run around and provide food for you. Some run around and provide further investments. Some give you a place to shelter and sleep in. Some servants should be given the work of creating wealth on your behalf. When a servant doesn't have a job description, they hang around in your pocket or in your bank account. They have no job description. One of 2 things will happen to those servants. 3 things. The first is that they will be lazy and they do nothing for you. They just sit there and they do nothing for you. The second is that they will go and work for somebody else because they don't have a job with you. And so they work for the bank manager and make wealth. When the bank pays you a measly 2% return on your current account or your saving account, do not fool yourself that your bank manager is very kind to you. He's giving you a 2% return. He himself is getting a 15% return on your money. And your money is working for the bank manager, not for you. It's creating wealth for the bank manager, not for you, even though it's your money. Your servant is serving someone else because you did not give him a job to do. The third thing that happens with servants who have no job is that you eat them. And when you eat your servants who have no job, then they cannot create children for you. There is no return on that money because you ate it. Every shilling should have a job description. And budgeting is simply telling your money what it will do for you. I want you to go into a saving account that is a fixed deposit account. Right now, the best fixed deposit account you can get, I believe, is at 10% per annum, which is with the likes of Faulu. And you can get 11% with Britam if you go and deposit your money with them. And you tell your money, instead of sitting here in my bank account, whatever bank you bank with, and getting 2%, I want you to go to Buana Faulu's, home and work for me there and create 10%. And then that money is serving you. Every shilling should have a job description. So how does a budget work? Okay? Write this down, because this is the golden principle I want you to take home. Okay? And it's what I'm going to, teach you today. Here it is. If you're living on more than 60% of your income, you're living beyond your means. If you're living on more than 60% of your income, you're living beyond your means. And you are headed straight down on the road towards poverty. How does that work? Let me give you an example so that you can understand what I mean by 60%, okay? Say, for example, let's take a fictitious guy called Steve. Steve earns 100,000 shillings a month. Okay, that's his salary. Sounds like a lot of money, yes? Yes, those of us in starter jobs, 100,000 is like the dream salary. You're not even there yet. You can't imagine what people who have 100,000 do with all that money. I mean, what do they do? 100,000. Wow. Okay, 100,000. It's a lot of money. So let's say Steve earns 100,000. What is the first thing that happens when Steve earns 100,000? First thing that happens is that the taxman comes and says, Bwana Steve, you owe me 32%. And so 32% goes to the taxman, the government, okay? And so Steve's salary drops from 100,000 and it drops down to 68. Now it's not so much money anymore, okay? The second thing that happens before Steve gets his salary, what is that? Somebody call it out. No, it's not the tithe. Second thing that happens automatically before Steve sees the money. Mr. Statutory Returns comes along and says, Mr. Government has taken his tax, can I also have my money? Okay, statutory returns. NSSF, NHIF, they now have what they call training levy 5%. Pension comes along and takes some of your money, and they take, anywhere between 2 to 3% of your money. He doesn't bite very big, but he takes 2 to 3%. And poor Mr. Steve's 100,000 has gone down by 32% and then gone down by another 2 or 3%. How much is he earning now? 65, okay? That's what they call the net salary, okay? That, I call it the take home, because this is an important figure. This is what you take home after the government has bitten its bit and then Mr. Statutory Returns has come and bitten their bit. What finally lands in your bank account is what you have control, because the government doesn't give you control over your salary. He takes his money, irrespective of what your financial state is, and gives you the balance. And so Mr. Steve has 65,000 left now. If Mr. Steve is living on more than 65,000 shillings a month, more than 60% of 65,000 shillings a month, he is living beyond his means. The 100,000 figure doesn't really matter that much. It's a 65,000. So somebody do a quick calculation and call it out to me. What is 60% of 65,000? 39,000. His salary is 100,000. But if Mr. Steve is living on more than 39,000, he is headed for poverty. Okay. So these ideas that you are going to see Barcelona, where is our service provider? Here's how. Okay? Here is hapo. Because if you're living on more than 60%, you are headed towards poverty. Okay, let me take the money. Okay, we said it was 39,000, okay? Let me take 39,000 and ask, what happens to the other 40%? Let me tell you where the 40% goes. Okay? Of the now remaining, it comes to about, 34% of what he's paid. Of now remaining 65,000 that lands in his bank account. First thing Mr. Steve does, now that he has control, is to set aside a tithe. That's 10%. Okay? I'll keep the maths easy by just using the figures that we have. And I know some of you are saying, yes, but do I tithe on the gross or the net? And yeah, we could get lost there. But many people ask that question so that they don't tithe. While I'm resolving this great philosophical question, let me hold my tithe until I have resolved it, and then they never tithe. Okay? You begin with just what we have, the figures we have, okay? So 65,000 lands in the account. And he sets aside 10% as a tithe to the Lord, to say thank you to the Lord for his provision, okay? Remember what we said, generosity begins at 11%. If you only give 10%, that is not being generous to the Lord. That's what he's required you to do. You become generous when you go above that 10%, okay? So he sets aside 10%. Proverbs 3, verse 9 and 10, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruit of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. So Steve sets aside 10%. At this point, that 10% is about 6,500. I'll round it off for 6,000 right now to keep the sums easy, okay? The second thing that Mr. Steve does is he sets aside another 10% for retirement. Let me say this to the young ones. If you begin to do this with the very first salary you will ever receive, you never need to worry about your retirement. And retirement is money you put aside and you do not touch for the next 50 years. That's what a retirement fund is. If you touch it, it was not a retirement fund. And Mr. Steve, at his salary, has 6,000 shillings to put aside for retirement. And he goes down to Mr. Faulu, or he goes down to Mr. Brigham, and he tells this money, you go and for the next 50 years, I want you to work for me. And I will come and see what you have done when I am finally 70 years old. And I want you to create wealth for me. At 11%, his money will double every 6 and about, a third of a year. I'll round it off to 7 years, okay? Every 7 years, that 6,000 will become 12,000, will become, 24,000, etc., etc. That is called compounding interest. And it is like magic, the way compounding interest works. We'll come back to that later on, okay? So 10% is a retirement fund. You know what the crisis of retirement is, good people? The crisis of retirement is that you work from the age of, I'll take it for 25. You graduate from college at about 22 years, 23 years. Maybe, you tarmac for a little while, and then you get a good job at 24, 25 years, and you begin your career working life, okay? And you work for the next 40 years before you retire at the age of 65. The retirement age for government and for many institutions is 65 years. Now, you're still strong at 65 years, and so you can still continue working another 10 years pretty well, okay, to 75. But you work for 40 years on salary. You retire at 65. What you have set aside for retirement is going to keep you going until you are 85, 90 years. In other words, for every 2 years that you work, you need to put aside 1 year of finances for your retirement. And it only works if you begin at the age of 25. If you're 40 here today and you haven't really begun putting aside a retirement fund, then you need to speed up. Mr. Steve, at 25 years, putting aside 10%, will retire and he will not have to worry about it because he doesn't have a big salary, but he has many years for compounding interest and his money will grow. But you, if you're 40 years, you haven't begun, you're even on a nice fat salary, you now need to put aside at a rate of about 40% of your income to be able to retire well at 65. It's a very hard job if you didn't begin early. But if you begin at 25 years, irrespective of how much you're earning, and you just put 10% aside, you will never need to worry about your retirement. But it has to begin at that age because what you have is time. And money grows with time if it is invested well, and you will never need to worry about your retirement. So that's 10%, okay? That goes into retirement, preparing for the future. That's another 6%. Okay, the third 10% is what Mr. Steve calls his investment fund. You see, my dear friends, here's the truth about money. Any money you invest is invested into a risk. There is no investment that does not also take risk on it, okay? The best place to invest with no risk is to take your money, put it in a box, and bury it under your bed and put concrete on it. That money is safe. Even the crooks can't get it because they don't know it's there and they will never think to dig up under your bed. But it will not do anything for you. In fact, it will diminish because of inflation. And so it loses value. The second place you can put money that is low risk, so you're not likely to be conned of your money, is to go to the big banks, Barclays and Standard Chartered and KCB and these sorts of banks and put your money there. Your money is safe, but it's working for the banker, not for you. And it does not grow. The third place that you go that is riskier, but you will get a better return, is go to the small banks. They always have a better interest than the big banks, but they're also the ones who go belly up, okay? And whether it's Chase Bank or etc., they have very good returns, but they're the ones that collapse, okay? So you get better money back, but you might lose all your money. The fourth place you go is to take your money into, something like shares. Shares will give you a better return than the banks, but Uchumi collapses and other organizations collapse and you may lose your money, okay? But they give you a better return. The next place you go is you go for T-bonds and T-bills, and those will give you a better return than shares will. But you better hope that you have a stable nation and that, the government will honor its pledges. Because Argentina and other places have, at times said they're not going to pay their loans because they have no money. Banks, or rather countries, go bankrupt. Now, if you're a Kenyan, the next place you go is you go for pyramid schemes. They give you great returns, but the risk is very high. And there's a stairway for creating wealth. The higher up the stairway you are, the more risk you're taking on. The returns are better, but the risks are big. The lower down you are, the less risks, but the returns are not very good, Okay? So Mr. Steve takes his 10% and he goes and invests it wisely and makes money off that. You never invest what you need. You invest what you are prepared to lose. And then you're safe. So 10%, I'm prepared to lose that if things don't work out. I'm going to buy Uchumi shares. I'm going to buy some KQ shares, some Kengen shares. And if any of those companies collapse, then it's okay because I took the risk. Okay? So 10%. The fourth 10% that Mr. Steve uses is he goes and puts his money into short-term investments. Okay, the other one was long-term. Long-term investments are investments that you will take 15 to 20 years. If you ever buy shares, don't watch the share market. Just invest in a good share. You can't go wrong, and you could. You can't go wrong with Barclays shares. You can't go wrong with NIC shares. You can't go wrong with, some of these sort of what are called blue chip company shares, okay? And once you buy the shares, forget them for 20 years. Don't worry that, shares have gone up, shares have gone down. Oh, don't go and buy, sell. You lose money that way. And the guy, the broker you use will tell you, sell now. Barclays is going down. Sell. And then he takes 4% of your sale. He's the one who makes the money. You're the one who loses, okay? So you buy your shares, forget them for 20 years. Come and look at them after 20 years and see where they are. Sell them then if you need to. Every time you sell, you pay the broker to sell, and you lose your money. Now, I know some of you here work for the bank, and some of you here work for brokers, and right now you don't like me very much, and but this is the truth of money and how money works, okay? And so, Mr. Steve, that's a long-term, 20 years. The short-term investments are for the short-term things that are 5 to 15 years. In other words, let me give you an example. How many of us here own a fridge? Many of us, most of us here own a fridge. That fridge will die. And if you have not set aside money to replace it, it will be a crisis. And so you set aside 10% of your salary, and it is for the replacement of the fridge, for the replacement of the car, for the replacement of the TV, for the replacement of all these things that have a lifespan. And they will eventually die. And when they die, instead of spinning into a crisis, you can go out and buy. Let me tell you, for the young people here who have not yet bought a car, okay? You should only ever borrow a car loan once in your life and never again. Here's how it works. Your company says you can borrow 1 million shillings, 4 years, 14% interest, and the company will act as your guarantee. If you pay back in the 4 years, we'll deduct the money from your salary, etc. So you say, okay, I'll buy a car. I'm buying a Vitz. It's going to be, 400,000, 500,000, and 4 years, I will pay it back. So you begin paying. It's on loan. You're actually losing money because you're paying 14% interest on that loan, plus all the legal fees and the sign-up fees and the mobilization fees and all the other ways that the bank milks you before they start getting their interest. Okay? So you're losing money. But you say, hi, Guru, I'm going to buy this car. So you buy the car. What you do is you covenant in your heart that that car you have bought will serve you for the next 10 to 12 years. And you will not replace it. Because you know what, guys? The car you own presently is the cheapest car that you can run. Even though it's giving you headaches. It's the cheapest car. And we fool ourselves into thinking that if I buy another car, I'll upgrade and it will cost me less and it won't give me all these headaches. But the car you own presently is actually the cheapest car. And if you change it, then you have to up your budget. So make a commitment. I'm going to pay back this loan in 4 years, and then I'm going to keep this car for at least 6 more years. When you finish paying the loan after 4 years, then you continue paying back. If the car was $500,000, you borrowed a loan of $500,000. 14% interest. That's going to work out to about, 25,000, 30,000 shillings a month, okay? And so you take that 30,000 and now you don't give it to the bank because you paid back the loan. You take that 30,000 and you put it aside. And you put it in an interest-bearing account. And you do that for the next 6 years after you have finished paying the loan. When that little Vitz finally is 10 years old, you sell it as scrap metal, okay? It's only one worth, 50,000 shillings. You sell it as scrap metal, you get your 50,000 shillings back. But the money you put aside has grown, has compounded, it has borne interest, and it is now enough for you to go and buy a car cash, even out of the showroom. But you don't stop there. When you buy a mitumba has a lifespan of about 16, 17 years. You keep it for 12 years, okay? And then you sell it so that you can get some money, some junk money off it, and you sell it after 12 years. Make a covenant to never sell your car until it has clocked 12 years. And so you buy the second car, and you keep putting aside the 25,000 that you used to put aside for the Vitz for another 12 years on this mitumba. And by the time the 12 years is over, that money would have grown so big that you can upgrade your car, you can get a new car out of the showroom, and you don't need to borrow from anyone. And if you buy a new car from the showroom, then require it to serve you for 17 years. I drive a mitumba. It's a Harrier. I bought it 11 years ago, and it's still doing fine. And I will keep it until it is 12 years, and then I will change it and sell it and buy a new one. And so that's what the short-term money is for. Replacing your car, replacing your fridge, replacing your TV, all the things you know are going to die on you, and you need to have put that money aside. So that makes 40%. You put aside a tithe, you put aside 10% for retirement, you put aside 10% for long-term investment shares, 20 years, etc., and you put aside 10% for, for the things that will die. Now, how much is left? How much is left now? 60%. If you're living on more than 60% of the money that lands in your bank, you're living beyond your means. Because you're eating into your retirement, or you're stealing the Lord's tithe, or you are alternatively eating your long-term investments that are the ones that will create wealth for you before you get to retirement, or alternatively, you're eating the life of your car and your fridge and all those other things that you will need to replace. And so when you go home today, I want you to sit down and ask yourself, how much money comes into my account? And you say, it's only 40,000. What is 60% of 40,000? And redo your budget so that you squeeze into that 60% of 40,000. Forget what the boss pays you supposedly, because the government comes and takes its chunk. And all these other bills comes and takes their money. Look at the money that lands in your account. 60% of that is the maximum. What does the 60% mean? This is what the 60% does. I have a long list here. It pays your rent, it pays your school fees, it pays your fuel and transport, it pays your entertainment, it pays your groceries, it pays your electricity, it pays for water, land rates, land rent, cell phone, watchman, household repairs, car repairs, tuition, credit card bills, insurance, gifts, clothes, vacation, newspaper, junk food, gifts to the extended family, supporting your mother, house salary, medical, wireless, birthday, everything. That's what the 60% does. You never touch the Lord's tithe. You never touch the retirement money. You never touch the long-term investment. You never touch the short-term investment. Everything must fit into the 60%. And I want you to go home and do the maths today. And the likelihood is that many of us here are living beyond our means. And our financial stress is coming from the fact that because we're living beyond that 60%, we have no margins. You know, when your mother calls and says that she's very unwell, can you help? You have nowhere to get the money from. You know, when the rent goes up, it's a major crisis, etc., etc., etc. 60%. And here's what you do, my dear friends. You can move into a cheaper house. Forget this thing of image. I was talking with Reverend Ondachi last Sunday after the service, and he told me of a friend of his who worked in a bank, and they were required by the bank to live in Karen or in Muthaiga or in one of those places. But the bank isn't paying you enough that you can live in those places. But they said, for the bank's image, we cannot have you living in Rongai. Imagine. I think every morning as the people are seeing you, want you to live in Karen. Okay. You said, no. My budget, 60%, I will move into a cheaper house. You move your children into cheaper schools. It's amazing how parents take on the biggest bill manageable for school fees. And they are nyongering themselves, they are struggling, they are crying every term because of the school fees, because they can't afford it. Move that child into a cheaper school. They don't need to be in the posh schools. Cut back on your shopping. I kid you not, guys. We do not do bacon and sausage and those sorts of things in my home. We eat githeri for breakfast, we eat githeri for lunch, and we eat githeri for dinner. 3 times a day. And you're laughing. You laugh at me. I will tell you in just a minute. Okay? But we do, very seriously. We cook a big, pot of githeri once a week. And we just mix it with everything. So breakfast is githeri and an egg. Okay? That's what you get for breakfast. Githeri and an egg and chai. Lunch is githeri and you also get a fruit and you get sukuma wiki. Dinner is githeri and the variety is spinach. Not sukuma wiki, spinach for dinner, and occasionally 2 days a week we eat meat. So I look forward to dinner. Tonight we're eating meat. I'm going to get a chicken leg for myself. Sunday dinner we eat chicken. That's one of the dinners that we eat meat. The rest of the week we eat vegetables. And you laugh at me. But my net worth, remember I told you, is 100 million. My net worth is 100 million, but I eat githeri. Now, we actually do eat sausage once a year. Yeah, you're laughing. We eat sausage, yes, because on Christmas Day, we have a really big breakfast, where we eat things like granola, and my children love Nutella, and we eat sausage then, and we spoil ourselves on Christmas Day. That's the only time that we eat sausage. The rest of the year, the staple is githeri. Githeri power, my friends. Mr. Githeri, you saw him, you had the energy to stand in the line as he was eating his githeri at the election. Simplify your menu. Make your own household soap. You would be surprised how easy it is to make soap. For washing clothes, for washing dishes, it is very cheap. You can get a liter of soap done for something like 50 shillings if you buy the ingredients and mix them up yourself. And we do at home. All the liquid soap we use for cleaning, we make it ourselves. Downsize your lifestyle. Grow your own vegetables where you can. And all the sukuma we eat and all the spinach we eat, we actually grow it at home in a little corner of our garden. Give up your car and use public transport. Start a little side hustle. I have some side hustles. Because I live on an acre of land, I keep bees. a kilogram of honey sells for 1,000 shillings. The hive costs you 9,000 to buy, and it gives you a harvest 3 times a year. Each harvest gives you about 9 liters of honey. A kilogram sells for 1,000 shillings. You can actually make it into a business. And I do it for us. We have 6 hives on my compound. It's my little side hustle. I keep Rottweilers and I keep Bobels. A puppy goes for about 80 to 100,000. And so I breed. I always buy a female and a male. They have a lifespan, the Bobels, for about 12 years. You can breed about 8 of those years. Once a year, they bear 12 puppies at a go. That means right now I have puppies at home. My bitch gave birth, about 2 weeks ago. I'm just seeing the money. When I hear them going, wee, 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 I see money. Me, I'm hearing money. And the best thing about bees is that bees go and steal the neighbor's wealth. They go and visit the flowers in your neighbor's compound and bring the honey back to you. They never take a sick day off. They never take leave. They work 24/7. My dog gives me money through the puppies that I sell, but it also gives me protection. My Bobel is about 70 to 75 kilos, the male. Try and mess with me. They give me security free of charge. And so, cut back. Your school fees for your children should never take more than 20% of the money that is available to you. Remember, he said 60,000 lands in your account, and that 60,000 now has to be household and etc., etc. So you take the 60,000 that, 40% you set aside, you're left with just 60,000. Of that 60,000, put a limit and a cap on your children's school fees. Put a limit and a cap on your rent. You don't have to have a 3-bedroomed house. After all, you didn't grow up in a 3-bedroomed house. Many of us here grew up in Ushago where there was just 1 bedroom for all the kids. And look, you turned out okay. And so cut back. If you're living on more than 60% of what lands in your account, you're living beyond your means. And if you live beyond your means, it's a horrible way to live because you'll end up in debt, you're depressed about your financial situation, you're always anxious, there's a lot of stress in your marriage, in your family. So here's what my wife and I do, okay? We not only keep a budget. In fact, this week, we sat down and went through our budget for the new year again. And because my wife is not on salary, we're now living on my budget. So we had to cut everything. And I told her, you like to provide this food, it's expensive, just cut it off the budget. It's more important for me that we live within our means than that I get the nice trinkets that, you can get with food. And she works hard to provide the things I like. And I said, I give you permission not to buy those things. Incidentally, by the way, I eat meat more than twice a week. We only cook meat twice a week in our family. Sunday is one of them. But anytime you invite me, I will eat like 3 days worth of meat. So when I come to your house, don't give me vegetables, When the church has meetings, I eat there. When I'm invited by a friend to go out and he says, shall we have lunch? Yes, and I will have meat. So I get meat more than twice a day, but we only budget 2 days a week for meat, okay? But here's what we do with our money, okay? So the money comes into the account. We have a joint tithe and benevolence account. In other words, we put money aside for our tithe, and we also put money aside for benevolence so that we can help people in need. We have children that we're paying school fees for, so we put that money into that account. It pays their school fees. We give a gift when somebody's in need, those sorts of things. We have a joint retirement account that we put our retirement fund in, and then we assign that retirement fund to purchase land or whatever for chamas, those sorts of things. We have an account, a joint account, where neither of us can draw out money except we both sign the check. Okay? That is an emergency account. I'll talk about that in a little while. The fourth is we have an investment account that we now keep with I&M Bank. We no longer go to a broker. The banks now offer that service where you can put money into their account and give them instruction as to what shares you want them to buy, and they will buy them and hold them for you, okay? And so we have an investment account, joint account. We have a school fees account for our own children that we always take the school fees and put them in there. And we try and stay ahead of the school fees so that when the new term comes, we just take the money out. There's no stress. Every month, we have a small amount that we put into the school fees so that when the school fees come, there's enough money. We have what we call an annuals account. When you budget, there are some bills that you only pay once a year. And those ones have a way of ambushing you, okay? My bills for once a year are the land rate that I have on my property, the land rent that I have on the property. I keep a post office box at Karen, and that's only 2,000 shillings a year, but I need to pay it. And so I put that money into there. And what I do is I take the bill, I prorate it, and I put the money into the account every month so that when the bill comes up, like land rents are supposed to be paid by March, you know, I can go and pay them with no stress because the money is there. I've been putting aside for a year now. And therefore, it doesn't stress me. And we call that our annual accounts. These 7 accounts that we have are joint. Both of us have to sign to get money out of them so that we can talk about it, what bills we're paying, what we want the money to do, and neither of us has access to that money except we're agreed as a couple that that's what we're going to do. Now, on top of that, we each have private accounts, okay? So that the money that we get, okay, as a salary you've been getting, lands into a joint account, and we assign it out into these accounts, and then each of us gets pocket money. And I kid you not, guys, I will tell you my secret, don't go and talk about it, and if you do, I will deny you and say I never said that, okay? So, but my monthly pocket money is 15,000 shillings a month. That's what I get to spend on me. This is why when I invite you, we go for coffee, I always pretend I haven't seen the bill until you say, oh, let me pay the bill first, and I say, thank you. God bless you. And my wife, we're a little more generous with my wife. She has 20,000 shillings a month for her hairdos, you know, dresses and whatever else. Okay? When we put aside a little money every year for our girls for birthday, 5,000 shillings per birthday. And we tell the children, nobody gets 2 birthdays in a year. You either decide if you want to take a cake to school, then there's no birthday, you know, party we're going to hold for you, or we hold it at home. They're allowed to invite 4 guests for their birthday party. Okay? And of the 5,000 shillings, we don't go and order a cake. Instead, we go with them and buy the unga and the eggs, and we cost it, and we take it from here, and we bake it at home. We give them free electricity to bake the cake. We don't charge them for that. But the unga they buy, okay? And then we spend 2,000 of the 5,000 shillings on a present. And each child gets 5,000 shillings a year for their birthday party. And yes, it may look as though we're stingy, but guys, I own an acre in Karen. I have a 5-bedroomed house. My net worth is 100 million. And you can laugh at me and my gideri, but me, I'm laughing all the way to the bank at the end of the month. Now you live the glamorous lifestyle, and you will look good, but your car is owned by the bank, the house is owned by the landlord, you have no reserves, you have not prepared for your retirement, and etc., etc. But boy, do you look good. But you're penny poor, and you're headed on the road to poverty. That's what the cost is. We use banks that don't charge ledger fees. I can tell you the account I hold with I&M, the minimum deposit is 5,000 shillings. And when they charge me, I always go and ask them, why have you charged me this? And if they tell me, oh, the bank has now a new charge that it requires, I shut the account and I go and open up somewhere else. I can tell you all the banks here that give you free accounts, 2,000 shillings minimum. I don't have fancy accounts. I was once invited to come and put, money in what was called a prestige account with Barclays Bank. And I asked, what does it mean by prestige? Well, you don't have to line up. There's an office when you come in, you just walk in. There's somebody to attend to you. You're given VIP treatment. There's a cup of tea as you're being served. And I asked, how much does it cost? They told me something like 3,000 shillings a month. I told them, no, I can have tea at home. And if I have it in the kiosk, I get it for 50 shillings a cup, and etc., etc. I don't want that prestige service. And I don't use any prestige services. And if they charge me any bills, they know I will shut the account and go and open somewhere else. That's how you build wealth. You have to have a budget and be able, therefore, to build. Here's one last truth. It's not how much you earn that matters. It's how much you save. What you save is what creates wealth for you. What you earn doesn't really matter. And so I told you of a man who came and asked me, please to help him with school fees. And I asked him, how much do you need? He had 2 children, I believe, in Turi. And he told me the fees are 700,000 per term. And he's begging for fees, for help. You can earn a lot and be penny poor, or you can earn little and still create wealth. It's not how much you earn that counts, it's how much you save. And so as the Bible says, do not start until you have figured out the cash flow and how you will finish what you have begun. We all are in the business of life. There's a retirement coming down the road. Have you figured that out? And month by month, have you figured that out? And when it comes to purchasing houses, have you figured that out? Do not start until you have figured out how you're going to pay what you need to pay. That's what is called a budget. Make every shilling work for you, not for your banker, not for your investor, but for you. Give it a job description. Do not keep idle servants who have nothing to do, because you'll eat them, or you will, they'll become lazy and they never make anything for you, or they will go and work for somebody else because they don't have a job description. This is how you build wealth. God bless you. Thank you.